Can you explain in layman's language what is the meaning of fund of funds?
A fund is nothing but your portfolio, and within that portfolio, instead of choosing up which stocks we want to invest in, we will choose which schemes or which ETFs we want to invest in. So a fund of fund is like a basket of funds wherein it's a very good start for an early investor.
So why do you think large cap there's a scope for a rally?
I feel that large cap has done a lot of beating. It has not performed versus the mid cap and the small cap, and there's a scope for large cap to perform in the next 1 to 3 years.
Who is this all cap diversified equity FOF relevant for?
All cap diversified equity fund of fund is for an investor who wants to allocate to market index funds, be it small cap, large cap, multi cap. But the investor has no idea when to invest, how much to invest, when to churn from large to mid and mid to small and so forth.
Growth trends, inflation, rate cycles, domestic demand, global conditions, and then basis these, you decide large, mid, and small cap split. How are these macro factors playing out right now?
Indian economy is recovering. It is in a good phase. The geopolitical risk, predominantly the war risk, is very important to understand because it has direct repercussions on oil, and oil is a primary input for all our sectors.
And what should be the ideal time horizon an investor should keep in mind if they want to invest in this fund?
Ideally for this fund, we suggest a time period of more than.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Fund Manager series at ICICI Prudential AMC, where we try to talk to fund managers at ICICI Prudential AMC and try to decode the markets and learn more about investing, mutual funds, etc. Today we have with us Ms. Sharmila De Silva, who's a chartered accountant and is also managing funds like multi-sector passive fund of funds and diversified equity all cap active fund of funds. We are going to talk everything about these two funds and also try to understand who are these funds for and what exactly is the investment philosophy when it comes to investing using these funds. Thank you so much, Sharmila, for taking out time. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm doing great.
Thank you so much. So before we begin, for people who don't know about you, can we walk them through your journey and how did you get into investing?
Sure. Like most of us coming into financial field, after doing their CA, I was one of them. But the journey started quite early. I still remember my articleship days. At the age of 18, after having my first PAN card in my hand, I went to open my Demat account, right? And that is when I guess my journey into financial field actually started. And there the interest of seeing where the stocks are moving, how the overall market is, that gave me some kind of interest, and that is how my journey started. Back into my background, actually, there is no one in my family or my entire village who was a chartered accountant back then, and I am quite first timer. So this field was actually very new to me, but also quite exciting with a lot of variety of options that the CA in itself has offered to me. So I started my journey right after my completion of CA, my first job here at ICICI Prudential AMC. I joined in the fixed income team, not knowing what fixed income is actually, because everyone knows what is equity. We don't know what bonds are or what actually happens in the fixed income side. But I joined here in 2016 as a part of fixed income team, then later joined into the equities team back in 2019, 2020, and as a research analyst for a business cycle. And today now I am as a fund manager in the equity team. So the journey has been quite evolving, exciting, and of course, learning at each and every step.
So how is your CA journey helping you in your day-to-day life at ICICI Prudential AMC?
So I guess numbers is something which we all CAs are very fond of, right? So the basic system, I can say the foundation of the system was laid back then in my CA. And whenever I did not do any I did not join any coaching classes for my CA exams. Even for the finals, it was only few subjects that I took the institute's help, but I did not join any coaching classes. So that curiosity for finding out deeper into each and every subject that was inbuilt, and which helped me to go deeper into all the stocks, or for that matter, any sectors that I covered today. So the foundation was laid back then in my CA studies, which is now helping me to apply those in all the fields that I'm venturing into.
So what are the total funds you're looking at ICICI Prudential AMC, and how many funds do you manage here?
So there are multiple. Actually, I look at all of the overseas allocation also. So all the domestic mutual funds that invest in global stocks, or the US dedicated or the global dedicated mutual fund schemes, those are handled by me. In addition to the fund of funds that you mentioned earlier. So it's a mixture of the global allocation, fund of funds, and I also do derivatives for our multi-asset fund, the large cap fund, and the recently we have launched ISIF, active asset allocator fund. So I look into that fund as well.
ISIF is a specialized investment fund where the minimum ticket size is 10 lakh rupees, right?
That's right.
Got it. So before we get into these funds investment philosophy, for people who don't know what exactly is a fund of funds, can you explain them in layman's language? What is the meaning of fund of funds?
Sure. So as the name itself implies, fund of fund, which means a fund is nothing but your portfolio. And within that portfolio, instead of choosing up which stocks we want to invest in, we will choose which schemes or which ETFs we want to invest in. So a fund of fund is nothing but a portfolio, and within that we will have multiple number of schemes. Now those schemes depend upon what the fund actually is. For example, the multi-sector fund of fund will have a lot of sectors in it, right? We have all cap diversified equity fund, so which will have only cap based schemes into it. So fund of fund in simple terms is a portfolio which includes funds. So I have to look into which schemes, which funds I want to invest in, rather than doing a lot of stock picking. And I would say fund of fund is a very good way for investors to begin their investor journey as well, because investors at a very early stage do not know how to select stocks, or rather which funds to get invested in. So a fund of fund is like a basket of funds wherein it's a very good start for an early investor.
But let's say I have a doubt here. If I am investing in a mutual fund, that automatically is giving me exposure to multiple stocks. So why will I be incentivized to invest in an FOF where I have the option of investing in different mutual funds available in the market?
Correct. So we have often seen there is a lot of behavioral bias as an investor which creeps into knowingly or unknowingly. Sometimes only when the funds start to do well, a lot of investors sees interest and the flows start coming in. When actually it might be the time that you should be reducing some exposure to that particular fund. So in a fund of fund, we basically take calls in which basket of funds do you really one investor should ideally be in, right? Which helps us to select at what point of time which sectors or which funds tend to do well. So I guess from an investor perspective, the timing is well managed by the fund manager. When to enter, when to exit, all those behavioral biases are kept aside. I can cite an example for you. In the month of January and February, we saw commodities, particularly gold and silver as an asset class, seeing a lot of interest. It was one way up, right? And it was exactly that time when we saw a lot of interest coming up into this commodities ETF, when actually valuations were not getting justified beyond a certain time. And in fact, as a prudent fund manager, one would look into selling into that sharp rally. But we saw a lot of investors coming in at that point. Come March and April, the war was at full-fledged and we saw commodities correcting. Ideally, it was the time to allocate, but flows also dried up. We had actually on a net basis almost nothing flows coming into the funds, right? So I mean the behavioral bias of when to enter, when to exit, that call is taken by the fund manager. One important aspect is also taxation. If you do this in your personal capacity, for example, today if you like the banking fund, tomorrow if you feel like I should now switch from banking to pharma, at each transaction that you are redeeming, you are bound to pay capital gain tax. Whereas if you're a part of this fund of fund, that capital gain tax is not attracted, because the fund, ultimately you will be taxed only once when you redeem from the fund of fund and not at every particular transaction. So I would say a fund of fund is a better way to invest, to take care of your timings, to take care of your behavioral biases, to take care of your taxation, and it's quite efficient as well.
So in terms of taxation, you're saying that if I am investing in an FOF, so even if let's say it switches from banking to IT or IT to pharma, I am not going to pay tax because that activity is happening in that FOF and not happening in my personal account. And I will only be taxed when I am redeeming my funds, and I have to pay capital gains tax only when I'm like redeeming my money.
That's right.
Okay, so similar to let's say stocks versus mutual funds argument, where let's say you don't pay capital gains when you are redeeming a stock, because mutual fund manager, when he's selling the stock, it is not happening in my personal account. So similarly, like in FOF, I will not be taxed unless I am redeeming my money.
That's right. That's correct.
Got it. Very simple. So I think this is interesting. So let's deep dive into the all cap diversified equity FOF, and let's try to spend some time understanding what is the investment philosophy in this fund. So what exactly is the meaning of all cap diversified equity FOF?
So, like the name mentioned, all cap. So, it is going to be cap based. So, in this particular fund of fund, we only choose funds which are based on market caps. So, I have a plethora of funds within iPro AMC. I have the small cap fund, mid cap, multi cap, flexi cap. We have large cap, small cap. So, all of the cap based funds is basically my canvas. I have to select which funds I want to run in this particular all cap diversified active fund of fund. So, as the name suggests, again, it's active, which means I'm not going to take a particular fund and stay on it for 2 years and wait for the returns to get delivered. Today, basis the market, I have to decide what mix of large cap, mid cap, and small cap I need in my portfolio, and accordingly, we choose which funds we want to invest in. Now, a lot of time we also see other than caps, there is a lot of style bias which the fund manager has. For example, maybe a flexi cap fund, the fund manager can have a pivot more towards growth rather than being on value. So I have to decide which cap I want to be in and also decide which style I want to be in. And since all these schemes belong to ICICI Prudential, we within the investment team have a clear understanding of how the fund manager views are, how is the strategy being played out. So this is good for an investor who wants to be there in the market cap funds, but do not know how much allocation should be there within each of these. So that is a great fund for them.
So can you help me understand what exactly is your current view and how much are you allocating to, let's say, large cap, mid cap, small cap as of July 2026?
Yes. So currently, as you know, the market is quite volatile. I mean, every weekend when we go home, there's a fear, or rather, you can say a curiosity of what happens over the weekend, because by the time we come back to work on Monday, a lot of things have already happened. And this is something which is on a daily basis. Oil has moved up, the war is still ongoing, though the peace deal was quite signed. So my bias is still towards large cap to a certain extent. So out of the overall portfolio, I would still assign a 56 to 60% of the portfolio towards large cap. That said, the allocation is also there towards mid cap and small cap, but we have seen that small cap has quite rallied in the last 6 months, or rather, you can say even last 1 year. So the allocation to small caps is still there because I give the benefit to the fund manager to do active stock picking in a small cap fund. But the allocation of small and mid cap is quite limited in that residual 40%. The higher allocation is still there in the large cap.
So why do you think large cap, there's a scope for a rally happening there?
So lot of distress in the large cap has also come because of FII selling. FIs have been very active on the large cap space. They are not so active in the mid and small cap. So the allocation of FIs is more towards the large cap. And in the last 1 year, for that matter, even 2 years, we have seen FIs have been continuous sellers. And that selling has predominantly come in large cap. So today, when the FI's allocation to the market, Indian equities, is quite low, I have a feeling that beyond this, there won't be many massive selling because they are already the equity allocation of the FIs is quite low.
But do you think that FII investing or FIIs investing in large caps will be now incentivized, or FIIs will start buying in India in the next few years?
So last few months, or to that matter, last two, 3 fortnights, we have actually seen FI interest coming back. And that was very relevant with the AI story not doing well in South Korea, or to some extent what happened with AI space in US also. So whenever there is a selling happening in AI, we have seen some kind of interest getting seen in India. So I guess that story might become full-fledged if the valuations attached to the AI story are quite high. And if that reversal of AI story happens, then we can see FIs coming back to India. And then if they come back, the large cap stands to benefit a lot more.
So what exactly is happening in this AI story? What happened in South Korea and why FII is invested in India because of the AI story?
So we have seen recently, because of the SpaceX IPO getting included in the NASDAQ, a lot of flows were even attracted for the AI story, and a lot of capex is getting built today in the AI names. But beyond the point, there are questions getting raised as to how sustainable is this? Because a lot of IT companies, predominantly into the AI space in US, have basically reported negative cash flows, meaning which that their capex investment is much higher than what their companies are earning today. This might continue for a year. We do not know when the timing will be suitable or not suitable. But all that we are seeing is a lot of capex is happening in AI with no sustainable or no concrete details of when these are going to turn into positive cash flows for the companies. And that is why companies in South Korea and in US have taken some kind of beating, and that is where we saw South Korean market also coming down, and to that extent flows coming to India. So this narrative, if it plays out in the next 1 year or 2 years, then we can see this trend continuing for some time.
So if I can summarize your point, you're trying to say that, let's say FIs who were investing in AI earlier, they are trying to say that now these capex, which all these companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta are doing, I read that they are spending close to $750 billion in 2026
Per year.
on AI capex, and this is just till now, like in the last 7 months, and this number has been rising. So you're trying to say that this capex is not justified for the revenues or the cash flows that they are making using AI, and which is why companies even in, let's say, South Korea or Taiwan, which are like the main microconductors and semiconductors companies, people are saying that, okay, the AI story will not play out, and that's why India might have an advantage because there is no AI company in India.
Yes, and to that point, if I might add, there are AI names also in China, but those names have not seen the kind of re-rating which the AI names in South Korea or US have seen. One example is for that matter, in case of China, there are a lot of AI names which are actually application based, which are really useful. But they are not seeing the kind of capex which is quite eye popping, like the $750 billion that you mentioned. One reason, of course, being China is very cost efficient and they are able to deliver the same output at a much cheaper cost. They are quite economical to that matter, actually. But we haven't seen the kind of re-rating happening in US AI stocks or the South Korean AI stocks. The similar re-rating has not happened in China. So I feel the capex at which US has been spending, maybe that should come down so that actually the free cash flows start to look better, or whatever capex they have done or plan to do, that must give you better results for the AI story to keep continuing.
But was this the main reason that FIIs were selling from Indian markets? It was also because FIIs are usually momentum driven, right? Like they try to invest in markets where momentum is happening. In the last 2 years from September 2024, there is no momentum in the Indian markets. So that's why they were selling. And is there any other reason you feel that FIIs were selling which you think is not true now and that's why FIIs will buy?
I strongly believe that this was one reason, the AI story, why FIIs have been selling India. Also, if you look in terms of US, the concentration of the market today is predominantly there in that magnificent seven.
Yeah.
So value as a factor, in fact, in US has not worked for the last 3 years, which is quite surprising. It is only the few names and hence a very concentrated rally which we have seen, and it's not a broad-based rally. So in fact, the money going out of India has not gone into the broader US market. It has gone into particularly the names relating to AI.
Got it. Very interesting. You also said that small cap rallied in the last 6 to 12 months in India. So what exactly happened in the small cap segment?
So growth has also come into the small cap names. The earnings revisions were also getting upgraded, and the small cap companies have actually delivered, whether be in terms of growth on the revenue side or also on the margin side, also on the earnings side. So purely on the basis of fundamentals, small cap have delivered in terms of their earnings, which the large caps have not been able to. And of course, in the large cap, a lot of the proportion or the weight of the large cap is towards banks. And private banks, for that matter, have not delivered in the last 1 year. Whereas small caps have delivered, and hence the rally is quite justified to the extent that it has delivered in its performance.
I was talking to a fund manager on my podcast, and he said an interesting thing that auto loans and home loan segment is now shifting from private sector banks to public sector banks because of the lower interest rate. And he was showing me a chart that the share of auto loans and home loans from FY22 to FY26 has increased of public sector banks versus private sector banks, and which was a cause of worry for the private sector banks, is what he was saying.
That is true. And that is why we have seen a K-shaped for a PSU banks and the private sector banks. So PSU banks, as you mentioned, were quite aggressive in their loan book growth. And that is why we have seen PSU banks delivering. And that is reflected in the market prices also. So even for the last 1 year, PSU banks has delivered very beautifully, whereas large cap banks have taken a beating and they continue to do so. So that shift in the home loan part, which you mentioned, is clearly seen in the prices also.
And do you think this is sustainable, where let's say lower home loan rates or lower interest rates on auto loans given by PSUs, they will be able to do this for the next few years without having high NPS?
I'm not of the view, because we have seen the capital ratios for this PSU banks also now coming down. And that is why I also have a tilt towards now the private sector banks. I'm overweight on private sector banks with a view that the aggression from the PSU banks may now be slightly lowering given their capital ratios. And hence the private sector banks are now in a good shape. A lot of hampering was happening because private banks were not as aggressive as the PSU banks were.
What do you mean by capital ratio of private banks, public sector
So
banks?
usually we look at the tier 1 capital and the CET capital ratios, the capital adequacy ratios. On the balance sheet side, we basically look at how much is the core capital of the bank, wherein we look at how much is the equity part, how much is the earnings of the particular bank, and then as per the RBI norms, we see how much is the capital adequacy ratio and how much that percentage is. People usually also refer to the LCR, which is the liquidity coverage ratios, and capital adequacy ratios. So these are the ratios that we particularly track. Those percentages are now slightly coming lower, which means that beyond which there's a minimum beyond which they won't be able to come down. And that is why the aggression from the PSU banks should also start to come down.
So what do you mean by that? When let's say capital adequacy ratio of a private bank is coming down, how do we interpret this?
So capital adequacy ratio of the PSU banks is
PSU
now
banks.
coming down, which means that to the extent, so if your capital adequacy ratio is coming down, the aggression with which you push your loan growth also comes down to that extent. For example, if you have 100 rupees, you were able to create credit or give loans to the extent of, say, 80 rupees or 90 rupees. If that capital in itself is now coming down from, say, 100 to 80, your ability to create loans also will get hampered. And that is why we are seeing a tilt towards private banks doing the catch-up rather than the PSU banks.
Got it. So reduction in capital adequacy ratio means that now I won't be able to give those amount of loans because my capital is lower, and which is why you are saying that you are more aggressive on the private banks.
Yes, that's right.
Got it. Interesting. So coming back to the all cap active diversified equity FOF. So you said that you basically would invest in large cap, small cap, mid cap, flexi cap, etc. And these would be invested in mutual funds only. So if a young retail investor who's watching this invests 10,000 rupees per month in this FOF, his money is basically going into all these mutual funds, the large cap, mid cap, small cap, on behalf of you, and you are going to decide which mutual fund to invest in, right?
That's right. So, but we will be only in this particular fund, we will be only investing in schemes of ICICI Prudential AMC. The fund will not have exposure to outside schemes. We have another fund, which is also a fund of fund and an all cap base, but it is invests also in other mutual fund schemes. But this fund is predominantly for ICICI Prudential mutual fund scheme, because sitting here, we know the style with which different fund managers operate, what is their strategies, how they look at sector overweights, underweights within their fund. And that is why this fund only invests in IPRU schemes.
Got it. And other fund, you're saying they also invest in different mutual funds apart from ICICI Prudential AMC as well.
That's right.
Got it. Very interesting. And do you think that FOF as a category in India is under-penetrated and people don't have awareness of that right now?
So the category is under-penetrated. We have been market leaders for quite some time now in the fund of fund category. One reason is because the expense ratio is also quietly higher, because here we look at different schemes. So, of course, the underlying scheme's expense also has to be borne. So, slightly the expense ratio is higher because it's a predominantly a fund of fund. But investors are of the belief that they can manage different schemes, different mutual funds. And that is why this category has not seen interest in the last many years. But now that a lot of fund of funds are coming up, which are quite innovative. For example, the multi-sector, which will invest only in the sector ETFs, which can take sectoral calls. Or this fund, which will only take cap-based calls. Or we also have a multi-asset fund of fund, which instead of choosing stocks will invest only in different asset classes funds. So I guess with a lot of innovation happening now on the fund of fund space, this category is seeing interest.
And in terms of FOF, who is this all cap diversified equity FOF relevant for, and what kind of an investor profile should invest in this kind of a profile?
So all cap diversified equity fund of fund is for an investor who wants to allocate to market funds or market index funds, be it small cap, large cap, multi cap. But the investor has no idea when to invest, how much to invest, when to churn from large to mid and mid to small and so forth. So I guess this fund is ideal for that particular investor who want to participate in the rally, which different caps have at different points of time, but are unsure of the timing and unsure of the proportion of the fund which needs to be invested.
And what should be the ideal time horizon an investor should keep in mind if they want to invest in this fund?
So ideally for this fund, we suggest a time period of more than 3 years, because if I'm investing, say, a particular allocation to a large cap fund or a large and mid fund, I would give the fund manager an opportunity for at least 1 year to 2 years for let them calls play out, right? So this is not purely not for an investor who wants to be there in less than 1 year or less than 2 years, but this fund is suitable for the investor money, which should be in the category of 3 years and above.
I was also reading in one of the fact sheet that basically diversified equity all cap active FOF, it has an internal framework where you also see growth trends, inflation, rate cycles, domestic demand, global conditions, and then basis these you decide large, mid and small cap split. So how are these macro factors playing out right now, and basis this how have you taken the decision of the split?
So right now, if you look from a macro perspective, Indian economy is recovering. It is in a good phase, but we have two shocks which are coming to the economy, which we have seen in the last 2-3 months, and both the shocks are external. So instead of looking only at the domestic, we also need to understand what's happening outside. And like I mentioned, the geopolitical risk, predominantly the war risk, is very important to understand because it has direct repercussions on oil. And oil is a primary input for all our sectors, mostly all our sectors. So that is where if the geopolitical on the geopolitical side, if there's a lot of instability, a lot of volatility, I don't know what's going to happen on a Monday morning. I guess a lot of emphasis needs to be there on a large cap, which are quite stable in nature rather than being in mid cap or small cap, which are quite volatile. I do not want to give an investor a very volatile experience. I want the investor to go have a smooth experience over the next 2 or 3 years. And that is why this fund will not chase the rallies which are happening in any particular market cap, but be consistent in compounding their capital.
Got it. Very clear. So I think I've completely understood about diversified equity all cap active FOF. Let's move to the multi-sector passive FOF. So you said that this fund basically will invest in sectors that you are bullish on. So what exactly is a multi-sector passive FOF, and who is this fund relevant for?
So multi-sector passive fund of fund is a very interesting product. It's a pure equity product. So I cannot take cash calls. 95% of the fund has to be invested in equity ETFs at all points of time. So it's a pure equity product. You get equity taxation for this particular fund as well. As a fund manager, I have to first decide where we are in the business cycle. So today, if I decide that the economy is in a recovery stage, what kind of sector stands to benefit out of it, and which sector should be completely not be there in the portfolio. So the fund basically picks up sectors which the fund manager believes are going to be the drivers of the next earnings growth which is going to come into the economy and accordingly take calls. So this is going to be a fund which only invests in sector ETFs. It cannot be cap-based ETFs or it cannot be style-based ETFs. You cannot buy Nifty ETF into this particular fund. It has to be a particular sector ETF. So this is for an investor who wants equity allocation but is unsure which sectors to buy in, when to buy banking, when to sell IT, when to buy infrastructure. So this fund is a very interesting fund because the fund manager takes the call which sectors will stand to benefit, which won't, and accordingly take calls in the portfolio.
So here also you invest in your own funds, or you're allowed to invest in other AMC's funds as well?
We are allowed to invest in other mutual fund ETFs as well. And this is completely passive. So it's going to be only in ETFs. So we do have allocation in other AMC ETFs also. So you get a good mix of iPru ETFs also and a good mix of ETFs from other sectors also.
So you said that 90% of the money is invested in equity ETFs. So for someone who doesn't understand what an equity ETF is, how would you like to explain?
So 95% of the fund has to be invested in equity ETFs. For example, there is an index called Nifty Banking ETF. So we have ICICI Prudential Nifty Bank ETF, which will exactly monitor what is happening in the Nifty Bank Index and it will track along with the Nifty Bank Index. So when you have an exposure to a particular ETF, say a banking ETF, you do not have one stock, but you have a list of 10 to 15 stocks. So you are tracking basically the entire banking sector, predominantly large cap and mid cap. There are not many ETFs in the market today which are sectoral and small caps. So it is going to be large and mid cap biased, but you will track the entire sector within that ETF rather than choosing which stocks you have to basically pick in. One important point why this is beneficial is, suppose the sector is in a good spot, no matter which company belongs to it, all the companies stand to benefit. But if the sector is not in a sweet spot, say something like IT, then we see whenever the sector comes down, all the companies in that particular sector comes down. So when the wind is positive for a particular sector, the sector performs, no matter which company you have to be. So sometimes stock picking may not work, but if you are in the right sector at the right time, I guess that stands to benefit.
So I was reading about the multi-sector passive FOF, and your sector book today, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's roughly 28% private banks, 11% oil and gas, 9% FMCG, 9% pharma, and 8% IT. So this is the sector book which is there today. We spoke on private banks in the first part of the conversation, but let's spend some time on 11% being in oil and gas, 9% being in FMCG. So what's the thesis in these two sectors?
Sure. So for oil and gas, we have seen the top constituents of that particular ETF have not performed in the last 1 year and 1.5 years. If you look from an oil perspective, the upstream oil companies are in a good spot today, because if oil prices are going to remain higher, which is my view, then upstream companies stand to benefit a lot. So oil and gas ETF has a good blend of upstream companies. They also have OMCs, the oil marketing companies, which stand to benefit with higher refining margins. So oil and gas is of course in a shortage because of the war and because of the disruptions that have happened in Middle East. So oil and gas as a sector is in a beautiful spot today. And one important thing is ownership of that sector is quite low. Now, what I mean by ownership is how much is the FIs holding, how much is the mutual fund holding, the DIs holding. So this sector is quite good placed in terms of how the FII holding is and how the DII holding is. So ownership is quite low. At the same time, we have seen earnings downgrade happening at every point of time, quarter after quarter. And that, according to me, has kind of now bottomed out. And from here, earnings upgrade cycle should actually pick in. And that is why I am positive on oil and gas as a sector. And I guess all the sectoral allocations that are there in the portfolio should be looked at in comparison to Nifty 500. Because if market also has 30%, 32% in banking, if I also have 32%, which means I'm equal weight, I'm not overweight, We need to see sectors wherein we are extremely overweight or extremely underweight. Because if I create a replica of Nifty 500, then my returns will be similar to Nifty benchmark index, right? I have to be slightly skewed towards the sectors that I like and sectors I dislike. So oil and gas is, of course, one sector which I like. In FMCG as a sector, we have seen massive derating happening. So the top 2 or 3 companies of the Nifty FMCG index are about 50 to 55%. So that's massive. And we have seen small cap and mid cap FMCG companies performing, but the large cap FMCG companies have not performed at all. And we have seen a structural derating which has already happened. The stocks are quite beaten down, in fact, at their 52-week lows. And as a defensive, I want FMCG in my portfolio because when the markets are quite volatile, I need some defensive part in the portfolio, and that is where FMCG adds as a sweet spot.
So you said small and mid cap FMCG stocks, they have done well. Large cap FMCG stocks have not. So why exactly? What happened?
So if you look at the margins of the large cap FMCG companies, they are still extremely high. So volume growth have not come up for these large cap names, but they have not lowered their margins to allow higher volume growth. Whereas small and mid cap names have been quite aggressive, quite innovative as well. That kind of innovation or aggression we are not seeing from the large cap names. So we have seen a lot of beating happening in the large cap, whereas mid and small cap FMCG names have performed to that extent.
Got it. You also have 8% in IT, and Nifty IT index, I think it has crashed almost up 25% from its February peak. What's your thesis there right now?
So I'm slightly overweight on IT sector. Now, again, I have capped that overweight at 2% over my Nifty 500 allocation. The reason being today, IT valuation has come down. The stocks have taken a lot of beating saying that these companies are not AI companies. And if AI story is really fruitful, then IT companies have to take a backseat. So I understand and I acknowledge that part. But I guess the prices at which they are available today, and if I am going to be anti AI, then I am positive on the IT names. And that is why I have in my portfolio. But at the same time, I have capped it at 2% overweight. The reason being, I have a fear that it might be the next disrupted sector. Say something like media as a sector. Pre-2020, media sector was in a good spot. But post-2020, when basically the focus shifted to OTT platforms, we have seen the broadcasters, the print media for that matter, not performing at all. So today the media companies are available at a very good valuation. They are quite attractive. But will one really buy into? The answer is no. Because despite being available at a good valuation, it might turn out to be a valuation trap. So I have a fear that similar sort can happen in IT companies if the sector gets disrupted. And tomorrow, if the AI companies say that we are going to come up with our own software companies, service companies, then I guess IT can become a disrupted sector. So while I'm positive, I have decided to cap that overweight at 2% because we have seen continuous beating in the IT sector. And I don't want that beating to impact my investor. So despite having a good amount of IT in the portfolio, the fund has done well because I have capped that overweight. And the other sectors where I have massive overweights, those sectors have performed.
How do you decide whether a situation is a valuation trap or a case of a deep value? Can you give some examples?
I have an interesting example from 23-24, quite recent. China. The market was looked as a value trap and it was available at very cheap valuations, and people were comparing China to Japan, saying that China is going to be the next value trap market like Japan. In fact, in some of the conferences when I used to meet some Chinese locals, they used to say, why do you have to invest in China? There is no value left in China. But I was very positive on China back then in 23 and early 2024, saying that the valuations are just too attractive at this point of time, and I invested a lot in China. And then we saw the rally in 24, rally in 25, and in fact the market just doubled and it made quite good amount of money. I guess what is value and what is value trap needs to be seen. If the companies are still having that potential of delivering growth, delivering earnings, then it is not a value trap. In fact, it is a value which is not seen by many. And I guess that is an opportunity for you to go all in.
Right. And so with your China example, so that time you felt it was not a value trap where everyone was thinking it's a value trap.
True.
And did you then invest in like Chinese markets, or like were you bullish on China at that point?
Yes, so we did invest in China at that point of time. We have a particular fund
Hmm.
wherein we could invest in offshore ETFs again through the passive route. So we did invested in China ETFs, and that made quite good amount of money.
Got it. And the last sector is pharma. So you have 9% in pharma. So what's your thesis there?
So pharma, if you look at again with the benchmark, I am slightly overweight. The reason being it's a good defensive. Second is rupee depreciation is also helping the pharma sector. The earnings have basically played out now. The sector has performed massively. But I have reduced my allocation, but I still have slight overweight. The reason being that export story is still working out quite well. We know that the tariffs on pharma sector are now behind us after the Supreme Court ruling against US president. And overall, the sector is fundamentally better in a sweet spot, you can say, for good growth in the sector. And that is why I have pharma in my particular fund.
So can we deep dive on this? Like you said, the export story, you are bullish on that. So what do you mean by that? And rupee depreciation will in turn help in the exports. So how is all this correlated?
Sure. So most of our pharma companies are export oriented companies. Most of it also goes to the US. So quite recently there were drug shortages in US, and that is where we have seen the prices also going up for our pharma companies. The higher the rupee depreciates, our revenue in terms of dollars stands to increase. So that is better for our pharma companies. So that has played out well. And in the US market, being a very important market for our pharma exporters, that has helped us. So rupee depreciation plus some kind of drug shortages which have happened in US, and the new pipeline of GLP-1 that has come up, all these three factors are basically a good potential for pharma sector to do well.
I was reading that 1 in 6 households in the US are taking the GLP-1 drug, and basically it's a weight loss drug which people are taking, and of course some people are also taking it for diabetes as well. So I was just reading that the second order effect of this might also be on groceries, because people, when they take GLP-1 drug, they don't like to eat a lot of food, and that kind of industry will also take some sort of second order effect after this GLP-1 thing.
That is quite possible. And also, I guess that anecdote will apply to India as well, because right now the GLP-1 market in India is quite small. But I guess going ahead with lot of players coming into this market and the prices coming down, I guess this market can become quite big. So in case of India also, that opportunity for pharma sector also quite plays out.
Right, absolutely. And multi-sector passive FOF. So, who do you think this fund is relevant for? And again, what is the time horizon people should look before investing in this fund?
Sure. So, multi-sector passive fund of fund is for an investor who wants to have equity allocation, but they has no idea in which sector, when to invest, how much to invest, when to get in and when to get out. So I guess this is a pure equity fund meant for any type of investor who wants to have sectoral allocation. So instead of putting in money into different sectoral or theme-based funds, they can invest in this particular fund, which will give you an exposure to different sectors at different point of time, and which can create good returns beyond 1 year. So I can say this fund is a good product for anything above 1 year time period.
Okay, so 1 year, anything over 1 year, like you can invest in this
Sure,
fund.
yeah.
1 year, isn't it too less, like too
So
quick?
because we take sectoral calls, which are relevant for more than 1 year time period also, but since it is an ETF, since it's a passive way of investing rather than choosing stocks to invest in, the fund can basically play out in 1 year time period. But I'm saying if the fund is so good, and I mean, if one should have a look at the construct of the portfolio, the sectors which I have chosen to be there, the sectors I believe are going to play out in 1 year to 3 year time period. So any investor want to invest even for a time period of 3 years and above, this fund is a good fund to invest in. One example I want to quote relevant for this fund is something like power as a sector. Maybe that it doesn't get the eye when the investor looks into it because the proportion of the fund is lower. But if you look versus the benchmark, power as a sector, I have significant overweight. So, for example, back in February and March, when power stocks were not doing that well, the fund manager has to be forward looking. So, I basically saw how was April and May last year. So, if you remember, April and May last year, it was quite wet. Monsoon basically came in May. Whereas this time, there were already talks of El Nino, monsoon not coming in earlier. So, the power demand last year was quite low, and we were already coming into harsh summers, which means that power demand was going to be higher versus what it was last year. Add to this, there were also other fundamental factors other than the monsoon part, was data centers coming to India, which requires a lot of power. All these things made me positive on power sector. Now, this fund basically invest in the sector ETF. So I did not have to choose which stocks to play with or invest in for enjoying the benefits of a power sector rally if it comes in. So I bought the power sector ETF in this fund. Came April, came May, we saw there was a lot of power demand going up. There was extremely harsh summers. Power demand growth went up into high single digits, and power stocks, all of them rallied. It was not just one sector or two stocks, it was the entire sector which rallied. So when the sector rallied, as per the published portfolios, then I sold into the sector. I still have weights, but I sold into the sector. So this sector fund ETF is quite beautiful because you can basically take tactical and core calls, be extremely efficient through exercising it through the ETF route, and you need not do a bottom up study on what stocks to pick up. When this, as I mentioned, when the wind behind the sector is quite powerful, the sector stands to benefit no matter what.
That's a very, very interesting example. I like how you chose power stocks this time as compared to last time because of the monsoon delay that happened, etc. I think that's a very interesting example. For someone who's watching this, let's say he has 10,000 rupees per month, wants to start their own SIP every month. Out of this 10,000 rupees, what proportion of that you think should be allocated in FOFs in general?
So I guess for an early investor, if the investor is quite at an amateur stage and not knowing which funds to invest in, how to select funds, then I guess fund of fund is a very beautiful category curated for those kind of investors to start their investment journey. Because you don't have to choose 5 equity schemes, 5 debt schemes, 5 commodities to be in. You can rather invest in different fund of funds that we have. When you get exposure through equities, you get exposure to debt and commodities as per the different fund of funds. And I guess that's a beautiful journey to start with. So out of the overall allocation, I would say fund of fund will even warrant 100% allocation from a investor side, because your need, or basically the investor intention as per their risk, is to basically be there in the markets at what point, when to enter, when to exit, what proportion. I guess those needs are taken care of in FOF as a category.
So let's say if I have 10,000 rupees and I decide that I want to invest entire 10,000 rupees in FOFs. So according to you, in July 2026, which are some 3 or 4 FOFs you would recommend that out of these 10,000, you should allocate this much to these many FOFs?
Sure. So there is a multi-asset active fund of fund which we have recently launched, which basically takes care of your equity, debt and commodities, but it is going to be all through active schemes. So that is one excellent fund which the investor can look into, but also the passive multi-sector. It is only for equity allocation, or the all cap active fund of fund. Again, that is for equity allocation. So an investor, if they want to basically place rupees 100 in a fund of fund, I would say they can invest in multi-asset to the extent of 50 to 60% of the portfolio. Be there in the multi-sector for the balance 20 to 25, and the residual can be put in all cap diversified active fund of fund.
Amazing. Very interesting. Thank you so much for doing this. I think we really understood everything about FOFs as a category, and we understood about your sectoral thesis and sectoral bets as well. This was very helpful. Last question, which I ask all the guests. If you were in the shoes of Kushal Lodha and if you were interviewing Sharmila De Silva, what is one question you would like to ask her towards the end?
That is quite a difficult question.
That's a tricky one.
Being a female and being in this industry, which is predominantly a male dominated, maybe if I was in your shoes, I would have asked how different or how easy or how difficult it is for a female to be there in this fund managing side of investing. wherein the numbers are not that, exciting.
That's an excellent question. So, being a female, like how difficult or how easy it is to be for you to be in this industry?
Sure. So I guess the number of females that we see in our industry is quite limited. In fact, when we walk in for meetings, we walk in for conferences, we are not surprised to see that there's hardly one or two females in the room, in a room of say 50 or 60 males. So you can say the ratio is quite low. When I started my CA journey and then into investment as a research analyst and then as a fund manager, I saw the number also getting dwindled along with age. Today I'm a mother. When I started the journey, I can say if there were 100 females, after marriage, that because of other commitments, the number of 100 dwindles down to say 75. But after becoming a mother, that number basically goes from 75 to less than 40. And this is the number which we have seen, right? So I guess the question is not about how many females from the education join the workforce. Many join. In fact, all of them join the workforce. But how many stay, that is quite relevant. And I guess that number has dwindled and continues to do so. At iPro AMC, I'm happy that the number of females in our team has increased every year. And that is something which is very excellent and giving a lot of parity. And there is nothing of gender inequality or workplace distinguish that happens. So I'm quite happy working here at iPro and happy to see the number rise. But I guess at the industry level, I would be happy to see a lot of female fund managers, research analysts basically coming up into this field.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for doing this, and thank you so much for inspiring everyone who is watching this. And I'm sure everyone have got amazing insights from your journey, and you've inspired a lot of people as well. So thank you so much once again, and thanks for explaining FOF as a category in a very simple layman language. I also got to know a lot of new things, all thanks to you, and wish you all the best with all your future endeavors.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.